Hey, welcome guys. I'm excited today to have a guest who I've been working with. Actually, Matt, I looked today. We've been working together since 2015. I know, crazy. This is my friend Matt Beckwith, and Matt is. I'll give you guys a little bit of background. He's a lifelong Virginia resident, and he's been in the mortgage business since 2003. He balances his time as a partner at OVM Financial, but also full-time loan originator. He has been recognized in the Scotsman Guide for the last, I believe, Matt, it's been the last 6 years in a row as a top producer, both locally and nationally. He was top 10 nationally in new purchase units in 2019, as well as in the top 5 nationally for VA loans in 2019. So you're going to see Matt in different places beyond just OVM. He's on different professional panels, providing insight and direction within the industry. He's quoted in articles in the Scotsman Guide and other publications. Matt is a husband, and he's a father of 4 girls, and he talks about how that keeps him busy at times. I don't know that I believe that. Spare time he spends playing soccer, coaching soccer. Are you a wakeboarder? Snowboarder?
Snowboarding.
Not
in Virginia, though. Not in Virginia. Yeah.
Right. And Matt shares that Jesus is a major part of his success, and he's an active leader at Community Church in Chesapeake, Virginia. So again, Matt and I have worked together since 2015. Matt, thanks for being on today, Matt. It's good to see you.
Yeah, man.
All right.
The video is just so good. So good. So good to see your face on this video.
All right. So the word that keeps coming up, we talked about this kind of just in pre-interview stuff, is the word unprecedented, right? So with the COVID-19 crisis and all that's been going on with that, it is. I mean, we're definitely in uncharted times. It's unprecedented. A lot of uncertainty. But at the same time, like, you've been in the business since 2003. We've both been through markets where there have been challenges, right? Sometimes super significant challenges. So I thought maybe for today, you could just share a little bit about what you and your team are going through, what you're experiencing, and then maybe connect that to different markets, different challenges in the past.
Yeah, I think it's definitely unprecedented. I mean, really, you can't compare this to anything else, I don't think, just because of the scope of it. So in 2008, 2009, when the mortgage market collapsed, basacally, and that caused the whole financial system to collapse and threw the country into a recession, it affected a lot of people. But I feel like this virus situation is really touching everybody. I mean, there's not any industry, any person, really, not just in the United States, but it's the world that's being affected by this. So unprecedented. I think it doesn't even do it justice. We're going to be talking about this to our kids, to our grandkids. Our kids are going to be talking to their grandkids about it, and it's definitely an interesting situation. So for us and our team, we really just had to adjust to not being in the same office together. And all working remotely. About 3 weeks ago, even before the stay-at-home orders were being put out, I just told my team to start working from home because there's really no reason in going to the office. We can do everything we need to do over the phone, on video calls, and so there's really no point in going in. But it's definitely been an adjustment for me as a leader of the team to make sure everybody's staying engaged and not taking shortcuts. And so we've had to make tons of adjustments. And honestly, I'm still figuring it out every day.
Yeah.
There's not a day I wake up where I'm like, all right, what do I need to do different today that I did yesterday? But the biggest thing is, like, personally, because there's so much swirling news and stuff that I have to wake up every morning, and I always joke about being a honey badger, right?
Yeah.
Honey badger, the most relentless animal in the animal kingdom. And so every morning I'm like, all right, I'm going to be a honey badger today, because I don't want my team to necessarily see me coming in any other way. And so I spend a lot of time encouraging everybody I talk to, not just my team, but real estate agents, anybody I'm on the phone with. I really feel like I'm giving motivational speeches 6 hours every day, just to keep everybody motivated, because there is a lot of noise. And it's, I guess the best way to say it is, we have apps running in our background. And right now that app is the coronavirus. And so sometimes, like when I'm talking to you, I still have the app in the background of all the uncertainty and the things that could happen, that might happen, that may not happen. And so sometimes that extra stress can cause us to be a little bit more short with clients or short with people. But I think recognizing that, and I've been bringing that up to my team, is important, to try to figure out how to shut off the apps in the background before you get on the phone with the customer, to make sure that you give them the attention they need.
That was said. Maybe let's share with the folks for a second, like kind of how your team is structured, how many people you have. You don't have to get into details of what each of them do, but like so share a little bit about the numbers on your team, and then how are you trying to help stay connected as a team? Are you talking to each of your folks every day, multiple times a day? You're doing team meetings?
Yeah, so all total, I have 10 people on my team, and it's basically broken out. I have 6 salespeople, and I have 4 support people, basically, if you just want to call them that. Whereas the salespeople are loan officers, basically. They do pre-approvals. They go over the numbers with the customers. They talk about rates. They lock people in. They go over their final CDs. The support people are setting up the loan apps, basically making sure that we didn't screw anything up too bad on the front end. And they're connecting with the customer, getting all the conditions, and getting the loans clear. So although I have all those people on the team, I have a very strict policy on how many people one customer can talk to on the team. So I never want a customer to know I have 10 people, so it's not something I advertise. I only want them talking to 1 to 2 people, or it's usually 2 to 3 people, I'm sorry, max during the transaction.
Right.
And so I don't want them to feel like they're getting passed around. So whoever initially talks to them from the sales team is the one that it's their main point of contact going forward. And then if like a manager type person needs to step in, either myself or I have a guy on my team, Ben Spitzer, who's the team manager. He can call and say, "Hey, I'm the team manager," and he can step in. But that would be the third person, because the third person is the loan coordinator, which is basically like a loan officer assistant, the person that gets all the documents. So the most we're talking to is 3. Customer only talks to 3 people, which I think is important, because I learned that the more you grow, it becomes more difficult to manage the passing of information, and a lot of things can get lost in the shuffle if there's a lot of people talking to the client.
Yeah, for sure. So real quick too, like I know there's people listening right now going, I mean, Matt's got 10 people. He's got 6 salespeople on his team. So reassure some people, like this wasn't an overnight thing. You've been building, and
Right.
yeah, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's all gradual. It's all been very gradual, over the years, and just evaluating where we are at in our business and what needs that we have. I always try to stay ahead of the curve, because you do get to the point where you have so much business coming in that you can't provide the service you need to provide in order to provide a smooth transaction for your customer. And so I'm always just trying to gauge that. Do we have too much business? Do we not have enough business? Can we be doing more? And just trying to add before you hit the point where agents are calling you and complaining, or the customers are complaining you didn't call them back because you have too much business. And so, yeah, it's been gradual, just kind of evaluating it all the time and seeing where our needs are, where our holes are.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. I know there's people thinking, well, I want to know, like, this sounds like a great problem. I'd love to have too much business, and we'll at least touch a little bit on today, like some aspects of lead gen and things you've done to build your business. But I want to circle back a little bit to the uncertainty aspect of all this going on today with the COVID-19. So, as human beings, we hate uncertainty. I want to know what's happening. I want to know what's coming around the corner. I know you do as well, but like, so maybe share for a few minutes, like how do you approach a time like today with so much uncertainty? So how are you handling that in your life? How do you handle that in your business with your team?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Like if somebody would just say, "Hey, June 1st, business as usual, everything's over, everything's going to be fine," I think we would all be in a better place. I
Sure.
think uncertainty can be a big part of it. But what I'm doing is I'm telling everybody I run into, like, let's deal with what we can control, right? And so the clients that are coming to us, the pre-approvals, the loans that we have to lock, conditions we got to clear, closings today, let's control that, and not get too caught up in what it could be tomorrow. Are the underwriting guidelines going to change? Maybe they could. They have been, and so we'll probably see more underwriting guideline changes. But as we get that information, then we'll adjust what we're doing. We can't control when or how or what that's going to be.
So control what you
So
can control.
pretty much that's it. That's all. I think I say that like 10 times a day. We're just going to control what we can control, because we just don't know what else is out there.
Yeah. So real quick, like just personally, I would say, I mean, you shared in your bio, you're a believer. You attribute Jesus not only professionally successful, but like as as the dominating person in your life. How does your personal faith then connect with this aspect of uncertainty? Like, yeah, we'll share on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it because I think as a believer I realize I don't really have much control anyways. I
Yeah.
mean, we have free will, but at the same time, I mean, God's in control, and there's really nothing we could do, yet really, other than doing what God calls us to do. And so I just believe that being a believer, I feel like God's going to give me wisdom and give me creativity, to not only get through this season, but look at it as an opportunity to excel in this season. And so that's really the way I've been looking at it with my team. I'm like, this is our chance to get some market share, right? There's loan officers out there, and I'm running into it almost daily that have disappeared. Like they're burying their head in the sand. They don't know what to do. They've never experienced underwriting tightening guidelines. They've never experienced products being pulled in the middle of production. Like this is like right in my wheelhouse. And so I think being a believer, I think that helps me even more.
Mm, well said. Um, there was I I think it was back, probably it was around 2000, maybe 2000, maybe three, four. And it was the first time I had met Todd Duncan. He shared a little story about when he first got in the business. I think this was late 70s, and interest rates were like 16, 17%. And he shared this story about how he looked at that as opportunity, right? Because just like you shared right now, there's so many people, loan officers who see this as, I mean, it's unprecedented. There's uncertainty, and it is a crisis. But he looked at that as an opportunity. I believe he shared he bought this button and printed on there. My name is Todd. Rates are 18%. How can I help you? So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that today, because I think for those of you that are listening, that may be one of your biggest takeaways today. Is like looking at this as an opportunity right now in the midst of uncertainty to grow your market share.
Yeah. And I can tell you, like, I've probably worked harder these last 2 weeks than I have the last 2.5, 3 years. And it's not that I wasn't working hard before, and it's not necessarily harder. It's just, I think it's more of an emotional grind.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, where I'm just like, whew, where your brain almost hurts because there's more to deal with, there's more to do. But it is exciting at the same time, and it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. All right. Well said. All right. So let's talk. Um, the last 45 days, rates have been, I mean, they've been bouncing all over the place, definitely down, but up and down. And everybody's being flooded with, refi opportunities coming out of their past client database. and other places. And so we've talked about this before. I'm definitely an advocate of embracing those opportunities. I think it would be a disservice to not, help your past clients, especially those that, where Refi could really help. But there's a danger, right, of getting pulled into that, sucked into that. And so, yeah, talk about that for a minute. Like, how do you thread that needle between servicing, the Refi business you have in front of you, but at the same time not taking your eye off the ball with purchase business or even other areas, other pillars of your business?
Yeah, I mean, it can definitely be a challenge. I've seen so many loan officers fall into the refi trap, of basically diving into refis and forgetting about the real estate agents and forgetting about their relationships that they had. And they go through a season of refis, closing plenty of refis. So they're closing, a lot of people closing more loans than they ever closed. But in the meantime, people like me are calling your agent. Hey,
that's the opportunity piece, right? It's a big part of the opportunity piece.
Yeah. So for me, I think if refis that come, you need to have somebody on your team or hire somebody that can handle a lot of that call volume. And honestly, in my opinion, refinances are harder because I came from an environment where all I did was refis before I got into the purchase side of things. And I used to think refis were easy, but then I realized that they're not, because number one, you have to convince them to do a loan, and then you have to convince them to do you, or not do you. That sounded horrible. Then you have to convince them. Then you have to convince them to use you.
Right.
And with the purchase, you get a contract. All you have to do is convince them to use you. You don't have to convince them to do a loan. They're getting a loan either way.
They're going to get a loan no matter what, right?
So the energy that it takes to do refi sometimes can be even more, in my opinion, than a purchase transaction. And so I always like to stick with what I'm good at, which is purchases. And then the refis that are coming in, I'm actively trying to get those, making calls, but I'm not going to sacrifice a purchase over a refi. So I'm not trying to close the refis in 2 weeks. And I'm trying to just make sure I'm utilizing my team to handle some of that, so I can still go out, meet with agents, talk to agents, and continue to cultivate the purchase side of things.
Yeah. So it's an opportunity, right, to reach out to agents. You're talking about how you're reaching out to agents when others are focused on the refis. So what does that look like when you're doing that from your desk?
I'm trying to video call all my agents. So obviously I'm calling them, but I love it when I catch them off guard with a FaceTime call, especially the first one. Now they're getting used to it. But I just go through and I hit the FaceTime, and obviously if they don't have an iPhone, I don't do it. But I'm trying to do that. The other thing I've been doing is I've been doing a ton of Zoom meetings with the bigger teams that I work with. I did one today with the whole company, about 30 agents. I've been on 2, maybe 3 calls with at least 30 agents on all of them. And so the way I'm doing it is I'm just saying, hey, we can't meet in person. Let's go ahead and let me give you some updates. It's also a good time because there's a lot of changes in the lending industry. So let me give you updates on what's going on my side, see if you guys have any questions. But I'm a big fan of video. Like, if I can see their face, I think the relationship is much better. Mm-hmm. But right now, it's more important to pick up the phone and call people, whether it's a video or not. So I even tell my team, like, if an agent has a question and they text it to us, sometimes just pick up the phone, just call them. Like, they need to hear our voice. Just texting back and forth and emailing sometimes it gets old. And so right now we're on an extended period of time. We're going to be working from home. Let's get on the phone. Let's get a video in front of them.
Yeah. So real quick, maybe give us 2 or 3 bullet points of what you shared with that team today, like, because that'll tell us, like, the message you're trying to send, maybe how you were trying to reassure them. But kind of give us real quick, what was the little bit of the outline of what you spoke about today?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd thank them. Just like, hey, I know you guys are out there showing houses. Thank you. Hope you guys are being careful. Wash your hands. I always start out that way. And then just let them know, hey, here's what's going on. with unemployment going up, lenders are worried about defaults on mortgages. And so underwriting's tightening guidelines on the high risk products. So then I'll go through the details on that. Also talking to them about rates, because the media can portray a false narrative when it comes to interest rates. Government loans, which I do a lot of VA loans, so FHA and VA loans, the rates are still good, but a lot of times we're having to charge points. There's no 0 point option, and that's something, if you're a real estate agent that's only been doing this 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you never really experience that. Conventional rates are good, but I'm just talking to them about rates, and I'm explaining to them, I need you to negotiate a little bit more closing costs from the seller. Just basically telling them, hey, I need your help. We need your help to get some more money from the seller because of what's going on with the interest rates on the VA and FHA loans, just with the charging points thing. So I think once the market normalizes, obviously, depending on when that's going to be, another 2 to 3 weeks, I think that will go away, but you don't know. Yep. You don't know what's around the corner. So in the meantime, we got to try to make sure we get our margins to pay our bills. I can't just waive the points on every single deal. So I'm just explaining to them, that was the big thing, is getting more closing costs, explaining to them that rates are still good. Just a lot of times they have to be charged a point or a half a point, whereas before we could do 0 points. And so the third piece I told them was the ratified contracts as quick as possible. I mean, sometimes I just got a contract this week that had been ratified for 2 weeks, and I didn't know. You know, I mean, we don't always hear back whether the offer was accepted or not. And, you know, I said, look, we need to know, because we need to look at the rates. It may be a good day to lock it, but we don't want to miss that. And we can't lock it without that ratified contract. So those are the main things. And I always end it and just try to be encouraging and just say, hey, there's still buyers out there. Pre-approvals are still coming in. So there's plenty of people that still want to buy. So let's just get out there and get after it. Try to finish with that.
Well, yeah, I think from a principal standpoint, those that are listening, like maybe your specifics that you'd share would be different, but you can tell like what you're sharing there is proactive. You are proactively letting them know, like, this is how you can help me. This is how, which obviously is going to help them as well. So, so this is a good segue. One of the things I really wanted you to share about was this VA niche that you've built, you and your team have built over the years. And so much so, we said earlier, you know, top 5 in the country last year. So one of the objections that comes up, and I know you've heard this many, many times, is, you know, a loan officer or even a real estate agent will say, well, a niche, like going into a niche and specializing, like that's gonna make things more difficult for me. I'm gonna close fewer loans. You know, I'm gonna lose out on all this other business because people are gonna think, well, I only do VAs, or I only do, you know, I'm a damaged credit specialist. That's it. Or I work in the luxury home market, or I'm a first-time home buyer specialist. That's all I'm going to get. Okay, so what would you say? How would you address that particular objection? Because I know you're doing a heck of a lot more than just VA loans.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, there's definitely on VA front. I mean, it's more of a product of where we live, where I live. You know, in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, I think the total, we have 11 military bases or something. So it's more out of necessity. But I do have people that have come to me in the past and said, hey, I want to specialize in jumbo loans, or, you know, I want to specialize in things. And so I always say specialize in the most common loan that you have in your area. So with me, I didn't really say I want to be a VA specialist, but I looked around me and I was like, hey, what is the most common loan that we do? And so in our area, that happens to be a VA loan. And I was like, I'm going to get really good at VA loans because that is the most popular loan. Now, if I said, hey, I want to get really good at jumbo loans, I would close about 5 a year because there's only that many jumbo loans available. So I try to focus on what is available. The other thing is sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get your foot in the door, right? And so when I first started building my business a long time ago, I did do a lot of credit rescoring and stuff like that. And everybody used to tell me, oh, you don't want to do that because then that's all you'll get. And I'm like, well, I'll take that right now because I wasn't getting anything. So, you know, so sometimes you got to take what you can get and then use that as a door opener to get the other types of loans. So it's kind of like the biblical principle: if you can be trusted with a little, God will trust you with more. You learn the little, and then you can get more down the road.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Truly, if you because if you are, well, even just the fact that you are, if you're branding yourself as a specialist, um, it that colors who you are. You are a specialist. You are, you are more than just a common loan officer, or whatever. And so it's a huge door opener. And then once the agent or whoever is referring the deal knows that you are trustworthy, that you have a system, that perhaps you have a team, that opens the door to everything else. So well said.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things I want to ask you was about your system, and you expressed, or you kind of shared a little bit earlier. And so I don't know that we need to get into the nitty gritty details about exactly what your system is, although I know those listening would love to hear more about it. But maybe just what are some of the keys for you, like that's worked well for you, especially recently because you've tweaked your system a lot over the years, but um, maybe some of the keys that have allowed you to set yourself apart, you and your team set yourself apart from the competition as it relates to the system.
Yeah. I've always I've always tried to be way ahead of the competition in all areas. And so when I look at the system that we have, I always want to be in a situation where I'm constantly looking at the next thing to get better. And it's not that I'm not satisfied with it, but for me, the number one thing with any system is to constantly be looking at it and see where you can do better. Because by the time everybody figures out what you're doing, you should be already ahead, figuring out the next best thing. So really with my system, I looked at what does the consumer want when they go to buy a house or do a mortgage, and what does a real estate partner want that is referring you to business. And so I basically just made a list of those things and said, in the perfect world, right, if an agent or a customer said, this is what my loan officer would look like, they would be communicating with me all the time. They would take care of my clients, whether they were credit repair or not credit repair. They're available to answer questions or call, pre-approvals. All those things, I made a list. And then I slowly just started to create a system that didn't necessarily involve me being the only person in there that could satisfy all those needs. And so it could be different for everybody, just depending on your market, what type of loans you do, how many people you got on your team. But that's where I would start, is figure out what does the consumer want, and then try to get to that point slowly. It never happens overnight, though. I know for me, my brain's always working. And I can tell you right now, there's areas I know we could get better at. And I know where I want to be in a year or 6 months or 2 years, just with our system. But it's not going to get there right away. You just have to continue to build on what you have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I know for you, that's a question that's happening all the time. You have a list right now of the things you'd like to implement. So this isn't a one-time shot. You don't get to a level and then rest on your laurels.
It would be nice, but then the coronavirus hits, and then you got to restructure everything.
Okay, so let's talk for a second about goals. So you are, I mean, for those that are interested, like I can tell you, this guy is a big time goal setter, and you are not content in any part of your life, I would say, in kind of resting on your laurels, getting to a certain place and then stopping and being content. So you're always pushing. I call it stretch goals. You tend to identify goals that over the course of a year, it's really going to push you. It's going to push your team. You guys are going to do things that are uncomfortable. And so, this year you're looking at 200 million for 2020. That's the goal. So
Yes.
my question is this: like with the uncertainty that's now in the marketplace, the COVID-19 piece, how do you take that piece, the crisis, the uncertainty, how does that potentially impact your goal, if at all? Because I know there's loan officers, real estate agents that, in fact, I would even say the average is kind of like throw up my hands. What can I do? You know, I wanted to do XYZ goal. I wanted to get to 20 million this year, but that's over. Like, how do you personally take a situation like this, and how does that impact your goals?
I mean, I can give you a really deep answer on this. Because I feel like people's personalities and the type of personality that they are really affects how they react to not hitting their goals. So I can just tell you, like my wife, she's amazing, and you know, as a kid, right, she always struggled with the fear of failure, right? She doesn't anymore, but she would struggle, and so she didn't want to ever set goals because she didn't want to fall short because it was too much to her. It wasn't even about letting other people down. It was just her inner personality, her drive.
Identity.
Um, yeah. And so I think over time, if that's your personality, you just have to realize that you can only control what you can control. And for me, when I set a goal, I do set ridiculous goals. And there's part of me, like I drive myself and I push myself to hit that goal. And I drive the others around me to get there. But I know that if I fall short of 200 million and I finish at 179, right, it's still 50 some million more than I did the year before. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. You know, you just have to be okay with controlling what you can control and just pushing to do the best you can, really. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's really my goal is I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to constantly be looking for ways to get better. And hopefully, if I do what I'm supposed to do, then I'll hit that goal. But there are other factors in all businesses. Um, right now, every business is being affected. I've talked to so many people. A lot of my good friends are, you know, leaders of large churches, leaders of charitable organizations, leaders of other businesses. And you know what the common theme is when this first started happening is, oh my gosh, I was set up to have like the best year, or we were set up to break records, or we were set up to, you know, so many people were set up to do really well this year, and it goes across the board. But it's just one of those things where you just adjust the goals, adjust your expectations, I think is the key, and just do the best you can. I mean, I still hope we hit 200 million. Um, we don't know. We could have a slow couple of months. In my mind, I'm a very optimistic person anyway.
Mm.
You know, hey, we could have like a killer last 6 months, or we could have a killer last 4 months. Maybe we'll make a run at it, but we can't really control that.
Perfect. Excellent. Um, yeah, and again, I think that's really helpful because I think, like you were saying, personality there is a big piece. God's wired us all differently, and so, but I think that aspect of just like you have to have something that you're pushing towards, knowing that if you don't get there, it's not an. It doesn't mean that you personally are a failure. It's not who you are, and I think that's something that tends to be the issue, like you said, even maybe with your wife back in the day, where it keeps people from setting that goal and really pushing it to drive and get there. Okay, so um, while we're talking, I added a couple questions, and just because I'm going to go ahead and ask you, I know, um, you know, in what I've been doing for 15 years, which isn't just coaching, but like managing loan officers and producers. Everybody wants everybody wants to talk to a top producer, or they want to hear like, well, what does that guy do? What does that gal do? I mean, they must be built differently. They are wired differently. They've got some superpower or whatever, and they want to know like, what is it that makes somebody different? Um, so maybe just share, like, I know there's probably several things you could share, but I mean, you're just a guy and you've got flaws. But when you look at like the arc of your career, maybe share just one or two things that you feel like have made kind of been a piece that's really helped you to drive to get where you are. That because I'll frame it this way. Certain people would just think, I could never do that. I could never get to a point where I'm shooting for 200 million in a year. But like, what would you say, like, that's been a key to you that other people could embrace?
Yeah, I think I don't think you can ever even, I could never imagine
No.
being in a position to even do this, because it's not like, you know, when you're sitting down and you're trying to do 30 million, you're not thinking about 200 million.
Right.
You know, that's not even on the realm of possibility. So it's something that gradually happens. But I know for me, one thing that I've realized over the years that's one of my strengths, that if you can embrace this, it'll take you a long ways. Is that I don't really care when people tell me no, and it's always rolled off my back. So I played college soccer. I happened to play goalie. I was in my own mind really good, but I was probably more mediocre. But in reality, but the one thing is I learned playing goalie, when you get scored on, you didn't really have a lot of time to worry about whether it was your fault or whose fault it was,
You got to have a short
or
memory.
short memory. And so I think that really prepared me well for the mortgage business in general. Because I just don't care. Like I'll pick up the phone. I'll call anybody. When I first started doing this, I would call the number one agents in the area. They had no idea who I was, and I didn't care, you know. And I think that mentality, if you can embrace that mentality of just not caring and not worrying about, these people put on their pants just like you do. Whether they're a top,
Like the agents that you're talking about that were top producers that you were calling, these are some of these are agents you're working with right now today. It didn't happen overnight, but like these are the same people.
the same people exactly. And you know, some of them wouldn't take my call, but you know, eventually I got to them. But my point is like you have to think about everybody. Everybody's human, and some of it's timing. But at the same time, you just have to be relentless and not care what other people think about you, or worried about when somebody says no. I mean, obviously do things the right way, but that's really the number one key for me. And then number two, I think, is really just, and it kind of goes hand in hand, is just keeping a perspective on, you know, not getting so caught up in the minor stuff of life, and just looking at the big picture. And for me, I'm always just thankful. I know it sounds cheesy, but like I'm just thankful for everything. Sometimes it can be the smallest things. And so therefore, keeping perspective, if a client gets upset or agent is upset about something, I'm not saying it, I don't reflect on it and figure out where I went wrong and how could I get better, but I don't let it keep me up at night. You just got to keep it in perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's like we said earlier, it's not a failure or somebody who's upset at you or whatever. Like, it's not who you are. That's not your identity. Isn't wrapped up in that, which we
Yeah.
talked about for a long time. But we'll pause there. So a couple other things, like you shared with me a couple, like quotes and slogans. And when I went to your kind of the bio section on your loan officer page, or maybe it was on the leadership page of OBM, it said there's a couple quotes that they said you use a lot as well. So I want to ask you about them. So one of them is you say, and you share with your team, today's going to be a big day. Today's going to be a big day. Just talk about that for a minute.
You know, it just kind of goes back to me embracing every day. And, you know, I'm just like, today's a big day. And everybody's like, well, what's going on today? I don't know. It's going to be a big day today. It's going to be a great day. Like, just encouraging people. I really just think where that comes from. I never thought about it before, but I think that's just coming from a place of encouragement. Like every day is a big day, right? Because we're never promised anything tomorrow. And so let's enjoy it. Let's have fun while we're doing it.
It's a mindset thing for sure. One other one, I know this is a big one. This ties in with your people, your team, your system, and what you really push and ask your people for. And that is leave no stone unturned. What does that mean?
Yeah. I just feel like every client that we work with, we have to exhaust every opportunity to get them approved to buy a house. If somebody wants to buy a house, let's make sure that we don't leave anything untouched, unturned that could possibly get them into a house. And so it's just a mentality I try to get in my team is sometimes when you first look at something, it doesn't look good. but maybe there's a co-signer. Maybe we can get their credit score up. Like, let's not go the extra mile. Let's make sure we're going the extra mile, do everything in our power to help that customer get qualified in that case.
Yeah. Excellent. Hey, this has been awesome. Hey, so before we close, like any last thoughts, maybe an issue or something that I didn't have a chance to ask you on today? Anything else you want to share before we go?
I mean, nothing that pops up. I mean, I think that everybody should know that no matter what stage of your career you're in, or your volume or anything like that, having a coach, having somebody like Jay, I'll just plug you right now, to bounce ideas off or get some ideas, I think is key. I mean, really, that's helped me out tremendously. Just having somebody that's not in my market, that's in my world, that, you can talk to, bounce ideas off. Obviously, Jay gives me a lot of ideas. So that's important. No matter where you're at, whether it's Jay or anybody else, have somebody there to help walk you through and help you build your business.
Thank you. That was unscripted. I was not driving for that, but I do agree with the piece of having somebody in your corner who to bounce ideas off of, whoever that is. I do think that's super important. Okay, Matthew, thanks for being on the call today. Thanks for being with us. You shared a ton, and I know that's going to be really, really valuable for those that are able to listen. So appreciate it, man.
All right, man. Take care.
You too.